On this day in 2007, the Spice Girls London reunion concert sold out within 38 seconds of going on sale. More than 1 million people in the UK registered for the concert, which was being held on the 15th of December at O2 Arena. Another 3 days ended up being added. On this day in 2004, Lord Mayor of Melbourne officially opened AC/DC Lane. The sign was erected while bagpipes played the band's song Long Way to the Top. The City of Melbourne also made extra copies of the sign in anticipation of fans stealing them. On this day in 1999, singer Lena Savaroni sadly passed away at the age of 35 after a long battle with EDs. She was discovered on the TV talent show Opportunity Knocks and became the youngest person to earn a silver disc, as well as the youngest person to appear on Top of the Pops. On this day in 2002, Robbie Williams signed the most lucrative British record deal in history. He signed with EMI for £80 million. On this day in 1982, Peter Gabriel and Steve Hackett joined the former band members of Genesis to perform a one-time charity gig at MK Bowl in Milton Keynes. The gig was to help raise money for Peter Gabriel's WOMAD project, which stands for World of Music, Art and Dance. On this day in 2011, new scientific research suggested that Queen's We Are the Champions was the catchiest song ever written. Musicologist Dr. Alison Pawley from the University of London conducted research into what makes a song memorable and compiled a list of the top 10 catchiest songs of all time. Other songs on the list included YMCA by the Village People, The Final Countdown by Europe, and Sum 41's Fat Lip. On this day in 1992, Sinead O'Connor caused controversy on the US TV show Saturday Night Live. During the end of a live performance, she pulled out a photograph of Pope John Paul II and ripped it into pieces as a protest against the Roman Catholic Church for the allegations that surround them. There was stunned silence in the studio, and the station quickly went to commercial break. The FCC also fined NBC $2.5 million.
We know we will win. We have confidence in the victory of good over evil. Fight the real enemy.
On this day in 1978, the members of Aerosmith bailed 30 of their fans out of jail after they'd been arrested for smoking pot at one of their gigs. On this day in 1945, a 10-year-old Elvis made his first ever public appearance in a talent show for the Mississippi Alabama Dairy Show. He sang Old Shep and came second. On this day in 2022, American country artist Loretta Lynn passed away at the age of 90. She was the first ever woman to be named Country Music Artist Entertainer of the Year. She wrote over 160 songs, released 60 albums, and won 3 Grammy Awards. On this day in 1978, country singer Tammy Wynette was abducted. She was beaten and held in a car for 2 hours, being threatened by a pew-pew. She was made to drive over 90 miles from Tennessee, but was eventually released. However, a kidnapper did also get away. On this day in 2007, Isaac Hansen, yes, this Isaac Hansen, had surgery to remove a blood clot from his lungs after being diagnosed with a potentially fatal condition. Now, I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of this, but he had developed Paget-Schroeder syndrome. However, he was expected to make a full recovery, and clearly he did. On this day in 2006, the legend Bob Marley was honoured with an English heritage plaque at his former North London home in Camden. The plaque was placed at 34 Richmond Gardens, where he lived in 1972. On this day in 1989, Motley Crue played a warm-up show for their forthcoming Dr. Feelgood tour. They played under the pseudonym The Foreskins, and the show was used for the filming of their next video, Kickstart My Heart. On this day in 1970, Janis Joplin was found at the Landmark Hotel Hollywood after an accidental overdose. She was known as the Queen of Psychedelic Soul and still remains one of the biggest selling artists in the US today, with over 15.5 million albums sold in America alone. On this day in 1965, Johnny Cash was arrested when crossing the Mexican border into El Paso, Texas. Customs officials found hundreds of pills inside his guitar case. He was given a suspended jail sentence and made to pay a $1,000 fine. On this day in 1958, Cliff Richard and the Shadows played their first gig together when they performed at Victory Hall in Hanley, England. So on this day throughout the years, we had a few notable names to the music industry pass away. So back in 1978, Australia's king of rock and roll, Johnny O'Keefe, passed away from a heart attack at the age of 43. In 2019, founding member of Lynyrd Skynyrd, Larry Youngstrom, passed away at the age of 70. That same day, legendary drummer and co-founder of Cream, Ginger Baker, passed away at the age of 80. The following year, in 2020, the iconic guitarist Eddie Van Halen passed away at the age of 65 from throat cancer. On this day in 2011, Rolling Stones magazine named Starships We Built This City as the worst song of the 80s. The final countdown by Europe came in second. Lady in Red by Krista Burr came in third. Wake Me Up Before You Go Go by Wham came in fourth, and The Safety Dance by Man Without Hats came in fifth. What do you think to that list? On this day in 2010, a New York memorabilia dealer attempted to sell a set of John Lennon's fingerprints for $100,000. The set of prints were taken at a New York police station in 1976 when John Lennon applied for permanent residency. The FBI seized the prints before a sale could be made, stating that they are still government property. On this day in 1999, Tina Turner won the Lifetime Achievement Award at the MOBOs. Other winners included Lauryn Hill for Best International Act, TLC's No Scrubs for Best Music Video, and Shanks and Bigfoot for Best Dance Act. On this day in 1991, Michael Jackson had the role of giving away Elizabeth Taylor in her 8th and final wedding. She was set to marry construction worker Larry Fortensky, however they'd later get divorced in 1997. On this day in 2016, the Rolling Stones and Bob Dylan kicked off the first night of the Desert Trip Festival at the Empire Polo Club in California. It was held at the same venue as Coachella and was a 6-day festival split over 2 weekends. The event made history as the highest earning music festival ever, raking in $160 million. On this day in 2002, Mick Jagger donated £100,000 to his old grammar school in Dartford. It was to help to pay for a music director and new musical instruments. With the government killing off a lot of funding for the arts, it's a shame that a lot of other big-name stars aren't doing the same. What are your thoughts? On this day in 2014, Taylor Swift was named Billboard's Woman of the Year. This was the first time an artist had ever received that award twice. The award is given to an artist who has shaped and inspired the music industry with a success, leadership and innovation. On this day in 2009, Stephen Gately unexpectedly passed away in his husband's arms in his villa in Mallorca. His husband Andrew believed that he had fallen asleep, so he cuddled up to him and eventually fell asleep himself. It wasn't until the following morning that he realised he had passed away. Stephen had passed from an undiagnosed heart condition which caused thickening of the arteries and as a result had caused the lungs to fill up with fluid. On this day in 2000, Britney Spears made her first UK live performance when she played the first of 3 nights at Wembley Arena. On this day in 1978, Joe Perry and Steven Tyler were injured when a cherry bomb was thrown on stage at an Aerosmith concert. This resulted in the group performing behind a safety fence for the rest of their tour. On this day in 1902, the Gibson Mandolin Guitar Company was formed. It wasn't until 34 years later, in 1936, that the first Gibson electric guitar was produced. On this day in 2010, George Michael was released from High Point Prison in Suffolk, England. He had served 4 weeks of an 8-week sentence for driving under the influence of drugs. On this day in 2005, Freddie Mercury's 1974 Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow was offered for auction on eBay by his sister. The car had not been seen in public since 2002, when it was used to transport his family to the premiere of the stage musical We Will Rock You. It was sold at auction for £74,600, which was 6 times its pre-auction estimate. It was relisted for auction again when the owner wanted to sell it to raise money for the Ukraine. It was estimated to raise between £20,000 and £30,000. However, it obliterated any estimates when it raised £286,250. On this day in 1995, Tupac Shakur was released from Clinton's correctional prison on a $1.4 million bail. The bail was posted by Suge Knight, and in return, Tupac signed a 3-album deal with Knight's Death Row Records. Happy birthday to Cardi B, probably most famous for her song Rap, however she is a highly successful rapper. Her debut studio album in 2018 debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 and also broke several streaming records. On this day in 1990, Dave Grohl played his first gig with Nirvana at North Shore Surf Club in California. On this day in 1989, Michael Jackson attended the opening of Michael Jackson Auditorium at his former elementary school in Hollywood, California. However, when allegations came out against Michael in 2003, the words Michael Jackson were covered with painted plywood and just left the words auditorium. On this day in 1997, John Denver passed away when his handmade experimental aircraft ran out of gas and he crashed off the coast of Monterey Bay. On this day in 1978, while Sid Vicious was living at the Chelsea Hotel in New York, he rang the police to say that someone had stabbed his girlfriend, Nancy Spungen. Vicious was arrested, charged with a murder, and placed in a detox unit of a New York prison. However, he died of a heroin overdose before the case went to trial. On this day in 1957, Little Richard, whilst on an Australian tour, publicly renounced rock and roll and embraced God. After this, he soon launched a gospel career. However, after 5 years, he was back to rock and roll. On this day in 2016, Bob Dylan received the Nobel Prize for Literature. This made him the first songwriter to ever receive the reward. The then 75-year-old musician was awarded the prize for having created new poetic expressions within the great American song tradition. On this day in 2002, Muse took legal action against Celine Dion after she announced that her forthcoming Las Vegas residency was going to be called Muse. Matt Bellamy, the frontman for the band, was quoted saying, "We don't want anyone to think we're Celine Dion's backing band." On this day in 1965, The Who recorded My Generation at Pi Studio in London. Upon its release, the BBC actually refused to play the song because it was worried and did not want to offend people who stutter. Happy 83rd birthday to Paul Simon, most famous for being one half of the duo Simon and Garfunkel. Their album Bridge Over Troubled Water spent 307 weeks in the UK charts. On this day in 2007, rapper T.I. was arrested and charged with weapons offences just a few hours before he was due to perform and receive 2 awards at the BET Hip Hop Gala in Atlanta. On this day in 1988, Def Leppard became the first act in chart history to sell 7 million copies of 2 consecutive LPs. Those albums were Pyromania, which was their 3rd studio album released in 1983, and Hysteria, which went on to become their biggest selling album of all time, selling over 20 million copies worldwide. Happy birthday to Natalie Maines, who turns 50 today, most famous for being 1/3 of the trio The Chicks. Despite all the controversy during the Bush era, The Chicks are the top-selling all-female band of all time. They are also the biggest selling country group in the US from the Nielsen SoundScan era. This is from 1991 to present day. On this day in 1972, Joe Cocker and 6 members of his touring band were arrested after a show in Adelaide, Australia. Police had allegedly discovered marijuana and heroin in their hotel rooms. They weren't charged with the offence, but they were given 4 hours to leave the country. On this day in 1969, New Jersey police put out a warrant for the arrest of Frank Sinatra due to his ties with the mafia. Happy birthday to Harry Webb, more commonly known as Cliff Richard. He is actually the UK's most successful solo artist and has over 100 top 40 hits. On this day in 2018, a study conducted by Fender found that women now made up 50% of all beginner and aspirational guitarists. They accredited this rise to artists such as Taylor Swift encouraging young women to pick up a guitar. On this day in 1995, Paul and Linda McCartney were guest voices on an episode of The Simpsons titled Lisa the Vegetarian. Paul McCartney's stipulation for appearing on the show is that Lisa's decision to become a vegetarian remain a permanent character change. Happy birthday to Chris de Burgh, most famous for his #1 hit Lady in Red, which was released in 1986. The song has gone on to be repeatedly voted as one of the most disliked songs of all time. Despite this, de Burgh still managed to sell over 45 million records worldwide. Happy birthday to Richard Carpenter, most famous for being one half of the duo The Carpenters. Their 1972 hit Goodbye to Love was one of the first to include a fuzz guitar solo. This helped to influence the development of the power ballad. On this day in 2007, Madonna signed a groundbreaking recording and touring contract with Live Nation. This made her the first major star to sign an all-in-one agreement with a tour company instead of going for a traditional record contract. The deal was reported to be worth $120 million over 10 years. It also gave Live Nation the rights to all of Madonna's music-related projects. These included albums, tours, merchandise, websites, DVDs, sponsorship, TV shows, and more. On this day in 1982, Culture Club appeared on the UK TV show Top of the Pops to sing Do You Really Want to Hurt Me? The show was originally meant to feature Shakin' Stevens, but he had to pull out of his performance due to being ill. This then led to Culture Club being booked. The song ended up becoming a major hit, and it is credited in large part due to the band's memorable performance on the show. On this day in 1965, the Beatles recorded Day Tripper at Abbey Road Studios in just 3 takes. They then added vocals and other overdubs and completed the song before the end of the day. On this day in 1961, Decca Records released Crazy by Patsy Cline. The song was originally written by Willie Nelson, who had intended it to be sung by Billy Walker, however Walker turned it down. The song didn't actually reach number 2 in the charts until a few months later in 1962. The song ended up spending 21 weeks in the charts and helped to launch the career of Willie Nelson as a performer instead of just a songwriter. Happy birthday to singer, songwriter, musician, actress and model, Nico. Most famous for being a member of the band The Velvet Underground, his first album, the only one to feature Nico, has often been listed as one of the most influential albums of all time. Nico passed away on the 18th of July in 1988 due to a brain hemorrhage which was caused after she had a mild heart attack while riding a bicycle on holiday in Ibiza. On this day in 1987, the Bee Gees became the only band to have a UK #1 hit in the 60s, 70s and 80s. On this day in 1962, the Beatles travelled from Liverpool to Manchester to appear at Granada TV Centre in between their lunchtime and evening shows at the Caravan Club. This was their television debut and they appeared live on the local magazine programme People and Places. They performed Some of a Guy and Love Me Do. Happy birthday to Alan Jackson, a country singer who's had over 50 of his singles enter into the Billboard's top 30 country songs. 35 of these entries were also number one hits. He's also received 2 Grammys, 16 CMA Awards, 17 ACM Awards, and is a member of the Grand Ole Opry. On this day in 2013, Paul McCartney played an impromptu gig at Covent Garden in London to a crowd of approximately 2,000 people. On this day in 2005, a study by the UK company Prudential found that the average person spent about £21,000 on music in their lifetime. This included things like stereo equipment, CDs, and concerts. They found that those that labelled themselves music enthusiasts spent over double that, with the average being about £44,000 in a lifetime. What's your opinion? Do you think that's a lot of money to spend on music? With streaming sites now, do you think it'll be more or less than the average 20 years ago? On this day in 1974, while Al Green was taking a shower in his Memphis home, his ex, Mary Woodson, burst in and poured boiling hot water over him. Green suffered secondary-degree burns and Woodson shot herself. On this day in 1969, the Jackson 5 made their first national television debut on the ABC TV's Hollywood Palace. They were introduced by Diana Ross and performed their song, I Want You Back.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Hollywood Palace. It's wonderful to return as your hostess again, especially tonight when I have the pleasure of introducing a great young star who has been in the business all of his life. He's worked with his family, and when he sings and dances, he lights up the stage. Here he is.
Do our very first release on Motown. It's on sale everywhere. Miss Ross, are you sure this is the way Sammy Davis Jr. got started?
Well, it's something like it. He started with members of his family, his father, his uncle, and Frank Sinatra. Hey, how about showing me some of those dance steps you were just doing?
Which one?
Well, the one that looks cute on you and the one that if I do it, I'll get arrested.
Oh, you mean the one like this? The one like this?
Yeah, that's
one like...
Oh. Okay, you little kid. Forget about that step. Show me some of the other ones, okay?
Okay. Are you ready, fellas?
Yeah.
1, 2, hit my
Kid acted. You know, I gotta tell you, Di, he's got to be a midget. Ain't nobody that can be that young and that good, because he's got it together.
Yeah, well, that's not fair to say that to him.
Oh, come on, you know I was only kidding. I really like the young man. It's really marvelous, because he and his brothers got the thing together, and it was beautiful of you and all of that for the show. But in fact, if he wants to wear my high heels, I'll let him.
Happy birthday to this music icon, Chuck Berry. He was one of the pioneers of rock and roll and had a major influence on the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. His single Johnny B. Good was one of the songs chosen as an example of music to be sent from Earth into space. On this day in 1978, the Police made their US debut when they played at the CBGBS in New York. On this day in 1976, Keith Moon played his final show with The Who. It was the end of a North American tour at the Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto. Happy birthday to this man that needs no introduction, Snoop Dogg. He rose to fame in the early 90s with his album Doggy Style, which went quadruple platinum. Happy birthday to this music icon, Tom Petty. Over his career, he sold over 60 million albums. Sadly, he passed just before his birthday in 2017. On this day in 2006, Sandy West sadly passed away from lung cancer. She was most well known for being the founding member, drummer, and backing vocals for the band The Runaways. She is often hailed by critics as being one of the most groundbreaking drummers in rock and roll history. On this day in 1997, the Guinness World Records announced that Elton John's charity single Candle in the Wind was the biggest selling single of all time since the US and UK single charts began. The double A side sold 31.8 million records in less than 40 days and raised over £20 million for charity. Nearly 30 years later, this record still hasn't been beaten, and Candle in the Wind remains the top-selling single since UK and US charts began. On this day in 1995, Billy Joe Armstrong was arrested and fined $141 after he mooned the audience at a Green Day gig in Milwaukee. Happy 30th birthday to country singer Kane Brown. He rose to fame on social media in 2014 by singing well-known country hits and was able to release his first EP by raising money via Kickstarter. On this day in 2000, George Michael outbid the likes of Robbie Williams and the Gallagher brothers for John Lennon's piano, which he wrote Imagine on. The singer paid £1.45 million for the piano, and when asked about it, he said, "I know that when my fingers touch the keys of that Steinway, I will feel truly blessed, and parting with my money has never been much of a problem, just ask my accountant." On this day in 2000, Pearl Jam appeared at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas to celebrate the 10th anniversary of their first live show. On this day in 1990, they performed their first ever gig at Off Ramp in Seattle. On this day in 1993, Oasis signed a 6-album deal with Creation Records with an advance of £40,000. Happy birthday to my first idol, Zachary Walker Hansen. He shot to fame in 1997 with 2 of his older brothers when they released Bop. While most people think of them as a one-hit wonder, they still remain successful in the music industry today and have 8 top 40 albums. On this day in 2007, rapper Foxy Brown was given 11 weeks solitary confinement after fighting with another inmate. It had also been reported that she had been abusive to guards and refused a random drug test. On this day in 1995, Def Leppard put themselves in the Guinness World Record by playing in 3 continents in 24 hours. They played in London, Vancouver and Tangier. On this day in 1962, a 12-year-old Stevie Wonder recorded their first single for Motown Records, Thank You for Loving Me All the Way. On this day in 2013, the magazine NME published their 500 greatest albums of all time list. In at number 5 was The Velvet Underground and Nico with The Velvet Underground. In at number 4 was The Strokes with Is This It? In at number 3 was David Bowie with Hunky Dory. In at number 2 was The Beatles with Revolver. And the number 1 spot was taken with The Smiths, The Queen Is Dead. What's your opinion of the list? How many of those deserve to be up there? And what would be your top 5? On this day in 2006, Taylor Swift released a self-titled debut album at the age of 16. The album sold over 7 million copies and topped the country album charts for 24 non-consecutive weeks. It also became the longest charting album of the noughties on the Billboard 200, staying in the charts for 277 weeks. Happy birthday to Rachel Agatha Keane, more commonly known as Ray. Her debut studio album, My 21st Century Blues, was released independently to critical and commercial success. It even went on to win the 2024 Brit Awards Album of the Year. She also went on to win 5 other Brit Awards that year and broke the record for the most wins and nominations in a single year. Happy birthday to this singer, songwriter, actor and activist Helen Reddy. Probably most well known for her song I Am Woman and most loved for her role in Pete's Dragon. She would have turned 83 today. On this day in 2019, the iconic olive green cardigan that Kurt Cobain wore for Nirvana's MTV Unplugged appearance became the most expensive sweater ever sold at auction. It went for £260,388. On this day in 2010, Boy George stunned an audience when he flew into a rage while on stage and threw a drink over a woman. The woman had been talking during the show, and Boy George could be heard saying, "Why don't you shut the fuck up, you rude c**," before pouring the drink over her. Happy birthday to Australian country music star Keith Urban, who started his career in 1991 with the release of his self-titled debut album. Since then, he has gone on to win 4 Grammys, 15 ACM Awards, and 13 CMA Awards. On this day in 1965, the Beatles received their MBEs from the Queen in Buckingham Palace. John Lennon said the group smoked marijuana in one of the palace bathrooms before the event to calm their nerves. Many former recipients gave their MBEs back in protest, to which John Lennon responded, "Lots of people who complained about us receiving the MBE received theirs for heroism in the war, for killing people. We received ours for entertaining other people. I'd say we deserve ours more." On this day in 2016, a letter John Lennon had wrote to the Queen to explain why he was returning his MBE was found in a record sleeve at a car boot sale. The owner took it to a valuation day at the Beatles Story in Liverpool and was impressed to find that it was worth approximately £60,000. On this day in 2014, the BBC released the top covers of all time. In at number 1 was the Pet Shop Boys with Always on My Mind, originally made famous by Brenda Lee and Elvis Presley. In at number 2 was Johnny Cash with his version of Hurt by 9 Inch Nails. In at number 3 was the Stranglers with their version of Walk On By Dionne Warwick. In at number 4 was Jimi Hendrix with his version of All Along the Watchtower by Bob Dylan. And finally, in at number 5 was Jeff Buckley with his version of Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen. What's your opinion? Are these the greatest covers of all time, or can you think of others that you believe are better? Happy birthday to this country music legend, Brad Paisley. He shot to fame in 1999 and has released 12 studio albums, all of which have been certified gold or higher. He has also scored 35 top 10 hits on the Billboard country charts. 20 of those reached number 1. On this day in 1957, local Los Angeles police told Elvis that he wasn't allowed to wiggle his hips on stage. Local press even ran stories saying that he needed to clean up his act. The following night, the Los Angeles Vice Squad recorded the entire concert to study his performance. Happy birthday to Desmond Child, a musician, songwriter and producer who has co-written over 70 top 40 singles. He's worked with the likes of Bon Jovi, Aerosmith, Bonnie Tyler, Cher, Katy Perry, Kiss, Alice Cooper, Joan Jett and many more. On this day in 2022, Taylor Swift overtook Madonna as the female artist with the quickest succession of 9 UK number 1 albums. Her album Midnight also went on to become the fastest selling record of 2022. On this day in 2007, Kylie Minogue was honoured with the Music Industry Trust Prize for a 20-year career and being an icon of pop. This was the first time in the event's 16-year history that a woman won the prize. While this flails in comparison to what he's currently facing, on this day in 2003, P. Diddy promised to investigate the claims that his clothing company used a sweatshop in Honduras. An organisation campaigning for workers' rights said that workers were forced to work overtime, were paid less than $1 an hour, were submitted to body searches, and would be dismissed if they were found to be pregnant. On this day in 1963, the Rolling Stones, the Everly Brothers, Bo Diddley, Little Richard and more played at the small town of St Albans in England. On this day in 2002, Jam Master Jay of Run DMC was shot dead at his recording studio in Queens. It wasn't until earlier this year, in 2024, that Carl Jordan Jr. and Ronald Washington were convicted of his murder. On this day in 1970, Jim Morrison of The Doors was fined and sentenced to 6 months in jail after being found guilty of exposing himself at a Miami gig. On this day in 2015, One Direction played their last ever show in Sheffield, England. It was their last of 80 shows across 20 countries. They said that they weren't splitting up, they just wanted to work on solo projects.
Our managers, before we came on stage tonight, gave us a plaque, and on the plaque was a list of every single show that we have done since the day the X Factor finished. I've 4 tours, and every one of them have been sold out, every single one of you. And I learned by looking at that plaque tonight, which actually blows all of our minds, that we, over the last 4.5, 5 years, we have played to over 8.5 million people. And I'm no mathematician, but that's a hell of a lot of people. And as I said at the start of the show, we won't be able to do without any injuries, without any of you. Maybe over the words, I don't even know what I'm saying now. We love you. The support over the last 5 years has been insane. But we can't tell you now. We'll be back, and we'll be back soon, and hopefully it's in the next 18 months or so. This is the masterpiece. some stage. But we can't wait to come back and see you. The touring is the best part about what we do. And I think that's why it's a little bit emotional for us tonight. Because we have, as I said, we've played so many shows around the world, every corner of the globe we've been to. And we're obviously going to miss it, so that's why it's a little bit emotional for us tonight. I would like to say, I'm sure the boys will, I would like to thank the boys, the three other boys, for having me. I've had a great time, boys. I love you very much. Thank you. Cheers. True, you've proven it on many occasions. You are fantastic and you are the best fans on this planet. And you are everybody else. And what you've done for us over the last 5 years is unheard of. So thank you very much. We love you. Have a safe trip. I will see you soon.
On this day in 2004, R. Kelly was kicked off of a tour with Jay-Z. The day before, R. Kelly had claimed he'd been attacked with pepper spray by one of Jay-Z's entourage while performing on stage. However, Jay-Z's publicist denies this. On this day in 1988, chart history was made when the UK Top 5 Singles chart was made up of entirely new entries. In at number 5 was Alanis Morissette, in at number 4 was Culture Club, in at number 3 was U2, in at number 2 was George Michael, and in at number 1 was Cher with Believe. The song reached number 1 in 23 countries and made Cher the first female artist to have a number 1 single over the age of 50. On this day in 1990, Billy Idol dumped 600 dead fish in Faith No More's dressing room. They responded by walking on stage during Billy Idol's set naked. On this day in 1989, the very first MTV Unplugged show was filmed in New York. It featured the UK band Squeeze and will go on to air on the 26th of November that same year. On this day in 1974, Led Zeppelin held the UK launch of their new record label, Swan Song. Nuns in suspenders were serving drinks and there was a naked lady that laid in a coffin covered in jelly.